Hey, thank you very much. I'm also honored to be invited to participate in this book launch. I've certainly very much enjoyed talking with Bálint over the years about these subjects and benefited immensely. And while I'm sure there's much more to come, I think this book in some ways, together with Bálint, Magyar and Madlovics now kind of teaming up, this is kind of a, I mean, I don't want to say crowning achievement because that somehow implies an end. But I think it's at a minimum a culmination of some sort of a lot of work that has been building in this direction, and it grows out of some of the same concerns that they've had that that Masha mentioned, that I've shared, which as somebody who has studied and taught post-Soviet regimes for many years, found it very frustrating that the conceptual apparatus that we have used to think about these regimes just doesn't fit. And this includes textbooks that we have available to use in our classes. It's always just been very difficult to find how I would like to communicate the nature of these regimes to students, textbooks that would somehow match that structure. And I always wind up kind of almost teaching against, like, while the material in the books is often good, right? I'm not saying that people who study these regimes have been inaccurate in any way. It's just the framework has been not appropriate. So, what a little more specifically, the frameworks have involved kind of the idea of democracy and authoritarianism, often treated as a dichotomy, certainly in the political science literature. And textbooks, among other things, tend to be structured around the formal trappings of democratic societies. For example, a presumption that the main actors in politics are entities like parties, parliaments, the judiciary, business qua business, right? Business acting as a market business organization. And so, these are not useless, concepts, right? We learn a lot about some things by using them. We learn about how, Russia, like the country that I've probably studied the most, but other countries have fallen short of democracy. We learn a lot about how these regimes have many features incompatible with democracy and compatible with authoritarianism. So there's a lot of research and a lot of writing on, modes of repression, corruption in these regimes, kleptocracy, censorship. And all these things are certainly important. And, so we have a lot of knowledge about what these regimes are not. We also have a lot of information and know a lot about how institutions in these countries, many of these countries, I don't mean all post-communist countries clearly, but a lot of them, institutions like parties, parliament, don't behave like they should in a democratic context, and how they're manipulated by the regime, often considered fake. So, we learn a lot about that, but what it comes out is we learn more about what they are not than about what they are and about how they work. And I think one thing we need to recognize, which this book does very admirably, is that these regimes do work, right? They have a system. They endure. Many of the post-Soviet countries, again, that's my primary area of specialty. I mean, they've survived in basically intact, with some permutations, some interruptions, for upwards of a quarter of a century. So just to kind of talk about what they're not and assume that, the features highlighted by what they are not, like authoritarianism and censorship, is really all that's going on in that simple way, and that is why they're enduring, I think, risks missing a lot that's important. And so, what this book does by Magyar and Madlovics is to provide, what I find an amazingly comprehensive set of conceptual tools, in their words, the conceptual tools, and an amazingly comprehensive set that is not useful only for judging these regimes and kind of measuring them against some yardstick of authoritarianism or democracy, but understanding how they work in their own right as regimes. So I like that they provide what they call a toolkit rather than a theory. But clearly there is theory there, right? It kind of informs the tools, but they don't take a strong position saying how the tools should be used. And I think that's a brilliant contribution, because it lays the foundation for building much richer future theory then could be presented even in a over 500-page book. It's not just a vocabulary, it's a language, it's a grammar for understanding these regimes. And so I think just some of the key insights that come out of it, I mean, there's so many, can't possibly talk about them all, especially when being asked to talk for 5 to 7 minutes. Kind of what differentiates a lot of countries is the degree to which there's a separation of the political, market, and the communal activities of citizens in society. And I would kind of characterize maybe the communal action as kind of what you might call the network action, right? When people are acting in terms of kin or different personal connections that they might have. And that the central actors are often thought of, best not as like the ones that I mentioned earlier, parties and parliaments, but these extended networks of actual personal acquaintance that often involve particularistic exchange, not necessarily quid pro quo, but often an exchange of very material benefits that can be arranged and rearranged, but often penetrate these different other actors, right? And so, I think what it helps call attention to is the fact that even when we see entities like parties or parliaments in other countries, it doesn't mean that they're fake if they don't look like what we think they should be doing. They just have other functions, right? They serve other needs, and they're doing other things. There's other reasons why they're there. It's not purely a Potemkin village. So I think all this makes possible, what the book also provides, which is a fabulous, first, among other things, typology of regimes in the region, which is totally novel and it makes perfect sense, and and gets very refined. I mean, once you get into the more refined components, I think one could find quibbles, but the key is it provides a framework for understanding the types of regimes and their variation. And I think the last contribution that I would highlight is, I love how it's been written so that it can be used as a textbook with all kinds of associated materials, which can be useful for students. And so now that it's out, I'm looking forward to figuring out how I can integrate it into my teaching. Just in the last minute, maybe that I have, or 30 seconds, I'll say, just so it's not like entire praise. I think my one, kind of quibble with the book that I would mention is, I don't know that it needs to be embedded in a civilizational frame, right? So, a lot of the logic of the book is kind of framed as if the separation of the political, the market, and realms of communal action is unique to Western civilization. And while the book has a sophisticated treatment of civilization that I think goes beyond Huntington, I personally just don't see that as necessary. And I think it risks, kind of inviting debate that may not, be productive. So, that would be my one kind of quibble with the book. And I think for people who are concerned about civilization, I would urge them to kind of read beyond that and make sure that that doesn't, distract from the larger contributions in which, that the book makes. Like I say, that's just really a quibble. I think this was a landmark work, and I look forward to seeing it be more broadly engaged, including in this forum. So thank you.